I did very minimal reporting on the border for AJ Plus when I worked there. And one of the things, just this was pre-Trump, we're looking at what is the border like? Is there a wall? Oh, there is. Oh, there's a bunch of fence. There's, all kinds of things. And one thing you notice is, my God, the gun stores. The gun stores on the border is something nobody talks about. I assume, you do a lot of that in your new book, Blood, Gun, Money. And I am curious as to, just talking about the ways that, so if we are externalizing, the violence, we're also externalizing the gun sales. So what does that look like, and how are American gun manufacturers sort of trafficking in the drug war through their sales?
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy, crazy thing. It's mind-boggling that it goes on. I mean, we know, like, the last 12 years, 160,000 firearms taken from criminals, including the most violent cartels here, and traced directly to US gun stores, US gun factories. I mean, we know that without a doubt. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. And the estimates are, made and is shared by the Mexican government or an institute in San Diego. More than 200,000 firearms a year trafficked from the United States to Mexico. Now, even if it was half that number, I mean, this is a crazy historic case of firearms trafficking. I mean, you've just got guns, an iron river of guns flowing down from the United States to Mexico, and then it carries on into Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and then down to Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil. This kind of huge amount of guns keeps bouncing through these places. And to extremely violent, criminals and extremely violent conflict, and how this just cannot be confronted, or in the United States, how this is failed to be confronted. And in the current administration, they're failing to confront this still. And there's things they can do, which they could have done yesterday. I mean, beginning with things like universal background checks, which are supported by, the vast, 90% of Americans in some surveys, 89% of Americans, the majority of conservatives, the majority of gun owners, and they're still not doing those kind of basic things. So it's crazy, it's mind-boggling, it's kind of frustrating, but it's a reality.
And so even a background check, obviously, like, we in the United States have plenty of gun violence to go around, but it, often it is, of course, the mass shootings that get the headlines versus, one or two, or in inner cities where it's like, okay, well, that's drug related, But right, I think that when you look at some place like the Northern Triangle or Mexico, or when, and potentially, and I'm curious if you think the United States could be headed this way if we don't do something, it's like, well, you need to avoid Nevada when, on your trip, because it's like if Sinaloa were, don't go to Illinois because the whole state is overrun,
That's the case.
Right. But in terms of the gun sales, I mean, you talk about these 9mm kids with 9mm, Kalashnikovs, rocket launchers. So what are, I guess maybe just, let me ask you, what are those things that you're like, beyond background checks? Everyone I mean, this is well known. DEA, Border Patrol, which is the largest federal law enforcement agency in this country, they know that there are weapons flowing into Mexico, correct?
Yeah, sure. So you see this. The way I see this, you have in the United States the biggest legal firearms market in the world by far. There's the last estimate was 393 million guns in civilian hands in the United States. It's more than the next 25 countries combined. But the way guns play out, there's a lot of factors. When you get into this, there's a lot of factors. I mean, there's less problem if people, there's a lot of individual collectors with lots of guns. I talked to a guy who had 200 guns stashed in his basement. So, you have individuals with a bunch of guns. To be fair, it's more dangerous when it's people who are determined murderers taking guns. Now, the cartels, a lot of these, gangs, the MS-13, they are people who want to commit murder, who openly, that's what they do. They're committing murder. So why is the US industry selling them loads of guns? And you see cases, I mean, what's kind of staggering when you get into this is then you find out, cases that somebody walks into a place and buys 85 firearms in a single purchase. And they're for gangs. Somebody buying, spending $500,000. One individual person going around buying and shop $500,000. People buying guns, a supposed 23-year-old kid with cash buying 50 cals, which they fire bullets this size, and spending $15,000 in cash for these things. So why is that happening? Why is there a person in Florida trafficking 1,000 guns?
Right.
And you start seeing these really crazy things, even beyond people can have their gun rights, Second Amendment rights, but beyond that, how come this is happening? How come this trafficking is happening so blatantly? And you see when it comes, the US is particularly against the drugs and guns, which are kind of entwined, like I call them like two venomous plants, like wrapped around each other.
Mm-hmm.
You see these kind of crazy things happening. And like with the universal background check, it's like a basic idea that you've got a law and you have to have a background check, and if the person's is a criminal who's been in prison for using for gun violence, they can't buy a gun, and then that is not applied, so people can buy guns. So I interviewed one trafficker in prison in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, who was traveling every weekend from from Chihuahua to gun shows in the Dallas area, and was buying a whole bunch of AR-15s and driving them back, and was showing no paperwork at all. And he called it like a black market. It's more like a grey market, really. And he explained the method. So we went and did this myself with a recorder, went to these gun shows, went to people. And they said, you can buy a gun, no ID, no paperwork whatsoever. You can buy our AR-15s. And you have it.
Yeah,
and then, they said they're abusing these laws, finding these holes. And the fact that is not stopped, it's kind of frustrating. It shows politics is quite broken, I think, in a lot of places. But in the US, politics is broken about solving problems. How come these basic things can't be fixed?
Yeah, that's the gun show loophole we've all been hearing about. Yoann, I'm hearing a bit of a echo. Could
you want me to put some headphones?
Put those adorable headphones on?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, I'll throw them in there. Absolutely.
Let's see if that's a little better. And we're gonna boo-doo-doo.
Okay.
Hello, I'm gonna talk. Yeah, that's so much
good.
better. Thank you. Sorry to make you wear those.
No,
they look great on you. But you just named two of the most well-known loopholes when it comes to gun violence and gun sales in the United States, which are the gun show loophole and the background checks loophole. And no one is saying that would foolproof, guns getting in the hands of cartels or dangerous murderers. But my God, you need to start somewhere. What is so fascinating and ironic about all this is, I'm sure you saw a lot of Trump Republicans who hate some immigrants. They absolutely hate immigrants. They are terrified of, caravans of mothers and children looking for work and survival. And yet they also love their guns. And if anyone wants to close a loophole about, selling a certain, amount of guns at gun shows or limiting it or a background check, they're the first ones to be literally up in arms over it. So how do you square that? Is that fascinating to you to know that that our policies around guns don't stop at the border, that they go through the border? And the more lax we are, the more we're feeding into a system that's destabilizing all of the Americas and is coming back to bite us, through, massive immigration, waves of immigration.
Yeah, totally. You see these circles of these things, and in these, sometimes you see the biggest issues in the United States of being guns and being immigration or undocumented migrants and refugees, and these two big issues are linked. And so you see these guns flowing down. Again, it's an iron river of guns. And then if you look at some of the people on the migrant trail, you see people fleeing Honduras. One tragic profile I look at it is a girl when she was 12. She was hit by a stray bullet in Honduras, and she was hit. The bullet hit her in the stomach, went through her waist and left her paralyzed from the waist down.
Oh my God.
So she was living. She couldn't go to school. Tragic case. She finally died at 17. And so people fleeing that violence. And I saw one woman who's also paralyzed from the waist down with some feeling in her foot, being carried between her husband and a friend, carrying her on the migrant trail. Another guy being shot in both legs for being in the wrong place. So loads of people literally fleeing gun violence and coming as refugees. And then that same circle coming back, and these obviously these big contradictions between being pro law enforcement, but being so pro gun, you're kind of anti law enforcement over guns. So you get these kind of put things. I mean, a way to fix it. I mean, you see, there is a way, and it's like just trying to say, well, this is a problem, and there's pragmatic things you can do to deal with it. You shouldn't be just the basic stuff. You really want to be selling guns to the most violent criminals, but also the drug policy itself, the war on drugs itself is faulted, from the core.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do it.